Escape Pod. Episode 694. Hunting the Mighty Space Whale. By Miranda Ciccone.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Escape Pod. This week's story comes to us from Miranda Ciccone. Miranda writes weird stuff and jokes. Her short stories have appeared in The Harrow, The Three-Lobed Burning Eye, and Defenestration, among other publications. She lives in Columbus, Ohio. Your narrator this week is Escape Artist's own S.K. Nash. So, get ready, because it's story time.
Hunting the Mighty Space Whale by Miranda Ciccone. Narrated by S.K. Nash. They sent me to blow up the ship, which was a pretty dramatic way to inform an employee that her services were no longer required. On the other hand, it's sort of my own fault because it didn't occur to me to say no until after the interview at the recruiting station. This makes me a good cautionary tale about not sleepwalking through your life, especially when your life involves being a deep space ecological terrorist. I suppose, in my defense, I could argue that I just sort of fell into sabotaging mining vessels and planting IEDs in the offices of Planetary Resource Extraction Limited CEOs, in much the same way another person might fall into a career in accounting or dressing up like a clown for kids' parties. I knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, and well, the whole story is pretty long and boring and mostly about networking. But it does kind of emphasize the whole don't sleepwalk through your life moral of this little Aesopian piece. I have no idea when the words undercover operative were stamped in my personnel file. I never even had a chance to lodge a complaint with my cell leader. It was just snip, snip, the sound of my dreads being cut off, and in a matter of hours I was standing outside the recruitment station on moon A-OR-39625 of planet XZ9-5, trying and failing to psych myself up for my mission. Intergalactic whaling fleet, I muttered to myself. See the galaxy, meet interesting mythical creatures, and save them. The concrete face of the recruiting station loomed over me and glowered. I gulped and clutched my personal effects tighter. Inside the recruiting office was an equally blocky, foreboding woman who loomed over me and never smiled once as she asked the questions necessary to join the deep space equivalent of the now defunct terrestrial French Foreign Legion. "You kill anyone?" she demanded toward the end of the interview. I blinked, startled. No? True. Okay. She made a sharp slash on the form she was filling out, recycled plastic paper, and poked half-heartedly at the computer embedded in her desk. Gambling debts? No? Jealous husband, wife, or other paramour? I shook my head. She narrowed her eyes at me. Really? No. Also true. See above, sleepwalking? Skipping out on child support? No. Student loans? I coughed. No, ma'am. She folded her sausage-sized fingers together. Well then, Satiny Gleff, you seem to be just the sort of individual we're looking for in our fleet. I have some forms for you to sign, but first let me extend to you my heartiest congratulations. She extended a massive paw to me as well, and as she crushed the hell out of my hand with her iron grip, I smiled and smiled and smiled. That was 3 decades ago, standard Earth orbit measure, and since then I'd been mostly alone on a godforsaken ship in the godforsaken depths of the void, with nary a word of comfort or even contact from my cell leaders. The stars made for very poor company, and deep space is a lot emptier than the human mind is really equipped to handle. The fleet was enormous, but against the immensity of the void, its size was a statistical error and could be safely ignored. Our mission was to find and harpoon the mythical space whale, But given how much of space is empty and that reports of the creatures were about as credible as ancient sailors' tales of mermaids, our chances of success were vanishingly small. It was a scientific expedition, of course, wink wink, etc. I hadn't bothered with blowing up the ship until this point in the story because, well, A, I was still on it, and B, it was so empty out there that I spent most of my time in cold sleep, and my waking hours zoned out on the so-called ecstasy of the void, or whatever. It's less thrilling than it sounds. The 579th time I came up from cold sleep, rubbing my eyes with one hand and clutching my space coffee with the other, the front of the ship took a hit that rocked it so violently I thought maybe I'd decided to blow it up after all and then forgot about it. Coffee went everywhere, mostly all over me, and I hit the floor with enough force to white out my vision. Klaxons sounded immediately, lights blared on in places that had sat in shadows for 30 years, and space cockroaches scrambled wildly for darker corners. I ignored them. Emergency instructions boomed from the speakers. I understood about 1 in 5. Warning, axial, tilt, adjusting, gravimetrics, pressure venting, unidentified body. Unidentified. Ha! The captain came tearing up onto the deck, cold sleep falling from his shoulders like frost. The rest of the skeleton crew must have still been below, unconscious. Only the captain and myself, the official maintenance tech, had the ability to wake them. I jabbed at the control panel as the captain staggered across the listing deck. With a clunk and whir, the view screen came online, a thin wash of shapes and light like an impressionist watercolor fading into view. As the image resolved, mostly black, the captain leaned heavily on the control panel and stared up at the curving neoglass. "What," he said, "in the hell is that?" It was the ship's fault, of course. The navigation system had been designed and programmed to search the enormous emptiness for some sign, some evidence of the mythical so-called space whale, and aim it in the direction of the most statistically likely quadrant to contain something that fit the possible characteristics of the thing, the whatever it was. But the whole space whale concept was a silly bit of self-delusion, a completely mythical and absurd fantasy with almost no possible basis in fact, just statistically improbable tales from spacefaring crew people who had spent way too much time in deep space. It wasn't supposed to actually exist. The captain was gently pawing at his stubbly face with one hand, eyes wide and locked on the view screen. Frantically, I scrabbled at the gleaming panel, trying to make sense out of the images the ship's sensors were throwing at us. I zoomed out. Then I zoomed out some more. I said, because listen, okay? There was a curve on the view screen, a gentle curve, almost flat, and it was translucent, glossy like glass, real glass, the kind our ancestors made with sand and fire on ancient Earth. Then the thing shifted, and it was solid, an immense plane stretching away from us, an endless surface blotting out stars and wreaking havoc with our sensors and gravity generators and moving. Holy shit, it was moving! It rolled. The captain made a high-pitched noise that in anyone else I would have classified as a whimper. There was an eye. It was the size of a planet. It was flat and glossy black, but inside was a spark, a light looking back. An intelligence? An engine of consciousness burning like the heart of a star? It was looking at us. "Oh," I said. "No." Space is, after all, pretty big. Fairly large, one might say. Immense, even. Vast. Catastrophically gigantic. Really goddamn huge. And it stood to reason, didn't it, that any life form that might have evolved somehow in that incomprehensible void might itself be also really, really big. "I think we may have miscalculated slightly," the captain whispered. The thing, the whale, The cosmic monstrosity that the faithful ship's computer had searched for and located and steered us unerringly toward had the gravity well of a planet. It was probably big enough to eat planets. It didn't just dwarf our fleet, it rendered it irrelevant by sheer virtue of its existence. Then it rolled again, and its opacity changed as if it were flickering in and out of reality. The computer flashed urgent readings at us about dimensional shifts and the derangement of the fabric of space-time, which was crumpling like a wire scaffolding in an earthquake. It surged down and down below us, and I could see stars on the other side. I could see a vast plain. I saw sheets of black volcanic glass that must have been eyes. I saw thin layers of membranes like pages fluttering in a breeze. I saw myriad tessellations surging. I watched planes pass through themselves. I saw darkness become soft and light become cold, and I was overwhelmed by the taste of salt and the memory of my bones shuddering outside of my body and the wind in the trees. The ship rocked in the gravitational backwash. I fell over. The captain fell over. Alarms blared, but strangely I felt no fear. A great sense of calm inexplicably overwhelmed me. It was as if an enormous weight I hadn't realized I was carrying was lifted from me in that moment. I didn't have to blow up the ship. We couldn't possibly kill that thing. It passed us by, and passed us by, and passed us by. A cosmic breath, a profound emptiness given form, an echo of our frailty and smallness in the face of an infinite universe. It seemed as if we watched it for days, maybe longer. Perhaps we did. Perhaps years went by, or centuries, but we survived somehow. If it had wanted to, that thing could have destroyed us. But it didn't. And afterward we were left alone, blinking in the artificial light, in the black gulf and the silence. The captain and I stared blankly at the empty view screen for a long while. Finally I got to my feet. "Well," I said, brushing off my butt and knees, "I'm going home." The captain did not turn. Distantly, he said, "What?" I repeated, "I'm going home." "Oh," he said, still staring blankly at the now empty screen. "Okay." I waffled then, waiting for his brain to come back online, waiting for him to look at me, bark an order, demand that I stay, explain myself, etc. He didn't, though, just went on staring. I edged toward the corridor, crabwise, expecting every moment to hear his voice ordering me back. I had 1 foot over the threshold before he said anything, and when he did, it was in a faint voice, not commanding, but thready, and a little wistful. "What are you going to do?" he asked. And honestly, I have no idea to this day if he was even talking to me. I said, "Find another line of work." "Oh," he said. He seemed to think about this for a long time. "Okay." "Okay," I muttered under my breath. I found the escape pods and went home. I had a lot to think about on the way there. It's a big universe, after all, and I had a lot of lost time to make up for. So I did.
There have been several times in my life where I have been extremely worried I was about to get into a fight, and I have done my best to escape them. I've always succeeded, too, because the combination of 6'2", 300 pounds, Radio 4 voice, and quiet manner tends to be chaff for drunken assholes. They go from, "I must destroy him," to, "Why is he nice?" This came in very handy when I accidentally got into a conversation with a member of a seminal punk group who was on, I would guess, the second day of his bender, and decided at one point to take his jacket off to prepare to pummel me, presumably with fisticuffs. He did not. but it was a close-run thing, and did involve me talking very quickly and quite loudly. I've had weirder nights, but not many. Anyway, there have also been times where I have wanted, tremendously badly, to take someone's head off their shoulders. I trained in judo for a good long time at one of the periods in my life when anger needed to be an energy that I used, rather than buried in a landfill at the centre of my soul in hope that it would be arable farmland in 10,000 years. It was great. It was terrifying. And I sucked at sparring, but it didn't matter because it did what I thought a fight would, what I hoped a fight would. Take me out of the brain trapped in an oversized meat sack and make me feel, make me live in the moment, make me stop thinking. I'm built like a polar bear, and grew up on an island Robert the Bruce invaded as a hobby. I'm a teacher's kid. I'm a nerd. And I was so well behaved my whole life, and judo gave me a chance to funnel decades of frustration at that into putting someone flat on their ass. Or at least trying to. It helped. A lot. It needed to. I found combat sports, first judo and later a hilarious short run studying Thai kickboxing, at the exact time I needed them, and I thought, at the time, they were an on-ramp to something else. Train up, get fit, take a couple of amateur MMA bouts just to see if I could. That sort of thing. I didn't. I won't. Although, going back to a martial art for training rather than release continues to be something which remains tantalizingly present on the mid-future horizon. See, the thing is, when I got to the mat, and shortly before I got my knee almost broken on the mat, I realised that what I needed was getting there, not where there could lead me if I wanted. I'd arrived. I had, despite my crushing lack of body self-confidence, despite my lifelong issues with my physicality, shown up. That was enough. That was my space whale. And like the character here, once I got there, I realised that where I thought I was going was just a postcard from a future I no longer wanted to arrive at. Always shoot for the moon. Always. Now, more than ever, if you're a creative, especially, then you're probably working 6 small jobs to get the equivalent of 1 salary anyway. That's only going to change when enough of us survive long enough to demand change. Survive. Help others do the same. Be one of those people. Be one of the people who helps others through the door too. Because when you do, when you realise the point is not to kill the space whale, but to witness it, the point is to bow off under your own steam, having lasted the hour. The point is to arrive. That's when you're home. We're raising money to raise our pay rates in line with the increase the SFWA are rolling out next month. We'd love to be able to match that straight away. If not, we want to match it as soon as possible. To do that, on any schedule, we need your help. Here's what you can do. $5 a month gets you access to our premium content bucket, and there is so much in there and more added constantly. Higher levels, more perks, it's all good. The $5 works for PayPal too, but if you want those higher levels, then you need to step across to Patreon. Alternately, if you can't stretch to money, could you perhaps donate some time? Signal boosting, especially with Apple Podcasts' laughable new categories, really helps. Leave a review, tweet a link, anything helps. We do need it. Thank you. We'll be back next week with, well, me, again. And August's Flashback Friday. This is How I Wish to Be Restored by Christy Yant and read by Mr. Lee. I'll be your host then, as now. Your audio engineer for this episode was Summer Brooks, and I will leave you with this quote from one of my favourite movies, The Abyss. You have to look with better eyes than that. See you next week, folks.